Welcome to Everyday Martial Artist, a weekly podcast where you'll join me, Brian Doucette, as I interview a different martial artist each episode and hear their story. Some guests you may have heard of, and some you probably haven't. Be sure to subscribe where all your favorite podcasts are available. Also visit our website at everydaymartialartist.com. If you're listening for a specific interview, I sure hope you'll stay and check out the other episodes. A very special thank you to Topher Williams for our custom theme music. And now, the newest episode of Everyday Martial Artist. Everyday Martial Artist is brought to you by KOOnline.com for all your martial arts needs. Sparring and safety gear, rank belts, uniforms, weapons, patches, and more. Wholesale supplies made by martial artists for martial artists. Visit us today at ko-online.com. Hello and welcome to another episode of Everyday Martial Artist. I'm your host, Brian Doucette, and as we do every week, a brand new guest talking about their background and their journey through the world of martial arts and other stuff they're involved in. My guest this week is a high-energy and charismatic podcaster, speaker, #1 best-selling author, and international top-rated course creator with over 1,000 students in 51 countries. He's been in coaching and facilitator roles for over 25 years. He's quickly becoming one of the most sought-after podcast consultants and content creators in the industry. Featured in Podcast Magazine, he's the editor-in-chief of the Podfest Messenger newsletter and regularly participates in industry panels, speaks at special events, and even appears on other podcasts. Lucky for us. So other than that, he's also a martial artist. So I'm looking forward to talking to this gentleman. I've been friends with him online for a while and never actually got to chat before today in person. So please welcome to the show my guest today, Mr. Larry Roberts. How you doing today, sir?
Doing great, Brian. Thank you so much for having me here, man. This is cool.
I'm excited. So kind of like we do with all my guests, let's go back to the beginning. Where did that first spark come from? What led to that initial interest in martial arts? Kind of like what age you were and how did that start?
I would say it was single digits. I would definitely say it was single digits. And I think it was probably inspired by ninjas.
Nice.
Honestly, I was born in 72, so I'm right there in that probably 10-year-old range when ninjas were all the rage here in the States. You had the ninja movies and you had ninja theater on Saturdays, and there was just ninja craze was everywhere back in the early 80s. And man, how cool is that? They're like superheroes, but they're karate guys too. Of course, I didn't know they weren't karate guys at the time. I didn't know that ninjas had their own style.
Yep.
But I got to go with that. I got to say it was ninjas that got me involved.
So did you ever buy issues of Ninja Magazine? Do you remember when that was a thing?
There's some in my attic right now. I'm not kidding. I actually have some issues of Ninja Magazine in my attic, along with Stephen K. Hayes, Ninja 1 through Ninja 4, and I have a couple of his other books up there as well as Ashita Kim and his books. Now, that takes us down a whole different path there if we start talking about Ashita Kim. But but at the time, I didn't know any better. You know, I just loved Monkey Steals the Peach. I thought, oh, that looks like that's going to work. That's a great-looking technique, so I'm going to try that someday.
That's great. I don't know if I have any issue. I have to dig through. I know I have the oldest issue I could find a black belt when I was digging through boxes. I think I had one from like 87, and it actually had Chuck Norris on the back advertising the Levi's stretched jeans for martial arts.
His action jeans. Yes. That's right, man. Yeah, with the gusseted crotch.
That's hilarious, man. Man. So do you remember the first ninja movie you saw? I got to ask that.
It's got to be Ninja, just Ninja 1, the very first Ninja. That would be the quote-unquote ninja movie. Now, of course, I know I saw tons of what they called Ninja Theater. It used to come on here locally from a Dallas local station. Every Saturday was Ninja Theater, but they weren't really ninjas. It was more of a kung fu theater that they had labeled as Ninja Theater. So there was plenty of that I had absorbed. But, yeah, the first Ninja movie would have been Ninja. No. It was called Enter the Ninja. That's what it was. Oh, yes. Enter the Ninja. That's what it was.
That was Sho Kosugi, right?
That was Sho Kosugi's big debut. Yes. I
love that movie. I honestly think, I'm trying to think, I think the first one I saw, because I know I saw one of the sequels. I want to say it might have been Ninja 3, The Domination.
It's my favorite, dude. Yes. I own it right now.
No, I haven't seen that in probably 30 years. I need to watch that again. But I know I saw that one. Then I went back and watched all the others. But I think my first experience with ninja ever was probably the TV show The Master.
Oh, yeah, dude. I used to watch that with my grandma. Yeah. No lie, dude. Yes. I love that show.
Yep.
Yes, with Lee Van Cleef.
Yes, and Timothy Van Patten. Was the young guy he was training. I actually have the pilot episode on DVD with Demi Moore in it.
Oh my gosh, for real? Demi Moore?
I forgot she was in that. I found that in like the $3 bin at Walmart once. I'm like, you've got to be. And my wife's like, why are you so excited? I'm like, you just don't understand.
That is amazing. I would have bought it too. I'd probably frame it, to be honest with you, because Shokasugi's in that as well.
Yep, he is. Yeah, I still watch it. I'll pull it out, and my kids are like, why?
Because it's the best, man. This is why, because it's the best.
I wish I could find the whole series. I've been trying to find that and Sidekicks. If I could find both of those on DVD, I'd be a happy man.
That is too funny. Sidekicks just became available on Amazon Prime, I think.
The series? Really?
Oh, no, not the series, the movie. I'm sorry.
Not the Chuck Norris movie, the series with Ernie Reyes Jr. If you remember that. Oh wow! So it was a Disney. So I'm hoping it'll show up on Disney Plus. It started as a movie called The Last Electric Night, and then it turned into a series because the movie was, but it was Ernie Reyes Jr. and Gil Gerard were in it together. Gil Gerard played a cop, and it was like friends with Ernie Reyes Jr.'s grandfather, and the grandfather died.
I am starting to put that back together right now that you're talking about it.
Gil Gerard took him in and raised him, and it would always be this like 8-9-year-old kid helping him solve crimes and stuff.
Because Gil Gerard, he was Buck Rogers, right?
Yes, exactly.
Yes,
yep.
Yeah. I'm starting to put this back together now. It's coming to me a little bit.
You can watch it on YouTube, but it's not the best quality. But it is out there.
No. The tracking's probably off or something, right?
A little bit. That's so awesome. That's great. So I got to ask then, when did the first lessons start? After getting the ninja craze, what was the first lessons, and did it take your parents convincing? And at what age did you actually start studying martial arts?
Oh man, it definitely took my parents convincing. And let's just back it up just a little bit, because my parents were never supportive of my martial arts endeavors at all.
Okay,
they never went to one of my fights. They've never been anywhere in regards to me and someone going at it a little bit.
Wow,
I was born with a birth defect, and I was born with an inverted sternum, so my chest was concave as compared to convex. And by the time I reached about 4.5 years old, it had gotten to the point where I had labored breathing, my heart was having a hard time beating, yada, 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 and I was going to literally die. So I had to have surgery between the ages of 4 and 5, and let's see, it's a sternum excavatus is what it's actually called. So they go in and they break your sternum in multiple places, do some sawing, do some maneuvering, and then they put you back together so that now your chest is convex like it normally would, so that my lungs can now expand and my heart can beat regularly and all my organs can do what my organs are supposed to do. So I had life-saving surgery at about 4.5 years old, and I was always super, super sheltered because of that. Because, I mean, any injury to my chest at the time could have led to death. And so they put me in private school, and I was always really pampered and really frail and just the real super soft type kid. And growing up, I hated it. I hated being the super soft kid. I wanted to be the superhero. You know, even there's a picture of me today that when I was 4 years old, I'm sitting there wearing a Batman T-shirt. So I was always a Batman fan. I'm a Batman fan to this day, and I'm 49 years old. That's never going to change. Nice. But I always wanted to be that super tough human male, you know, A-type personality kind of guy. And that's why I think I fell in love with ninjas so much, is because, I mean, they could whoop everybody, you know, and they're one person, and they got all these cool skills and all these cool techniques that allow them to be, quote unquote, superhuman, but they're just people that train. And if I trained and trained and trained, I would be a ninja too. So, nice. But again, it wasn't supported by the parents at all in any way, shape, fashion, or form. Okay. But I was probably, I was early teens. And of course, there's a sign up here to win a free week of karate, probably at Pizza Hut or someplace. And of course, I filled it out. And now that I know it's just a lead generation box, everybody wins. I won me a free week of karate. So Mom reluctantly allowed me to go and take this week of karate. And it was amazing. It was the most amazing week of my life. And I loved it. I got my free little gi and just had a ball with it. However, the rents wouldn't show up, and they wouldn't pay for it. So they weren't going to finance me pursuing my violent endeavors. So I trained as much as I could with locals in the area, just whenever I would get a chance, meaning that I would fight a lot. And I would watch ninja movies, and then I would go down to the mall, and there was a store in the mall that was called Rebirth Leather. It was a leather store, but they had a ninja section. So
Nice.
I would occasionally buy that ninja star that I wasn't supposed to have, or I'd buy that bokin that I wasn't supposed to have, or those nunchucks, and it goes on and on. I can't remember what they were called, but the hand claws that ninjas used to climb trees.
Yep.
Yeah. So, of course, I had me a pair of those and just all sorts of ninja things. And then I would run off in the woods and train. So, so that was my early on training. But I didn't start really training until my late teens. And I eventually got to where grandma would pay for it, and I started taking karate at a small local school. I don't even remember the name of the school or who the instructor was, because it wasn't that big of a deal to me at the time. It was big, but I mean, I wasn't obsessed with the school like I thought I would be, because I also had basketball and I had my job and I had my girlfriend. And at that age, chasing girls was a little more important to me than chasing black belts at the time. So that didn't last very long, but once I graduated high school, I started training at a school called West Academy that was owned by John West, and he was 6th Dan Mudaquan Taekwondo and 3rd Dan American Kenpo Karate. And I started training there, and I trained there for years and years, and he had a student by the name of Phil Berthoff, and Phil was more focused on the Kenpo, and I fell in love with Kenpo. And Phil was also a 3rd Dan in American Kenpo, and he started his own school there in the area. So I kind of jumped ship a little bit. So I jumped ship, and I went over to Phil's school, and under Phil Berthoff, I eventually earned my 2nd degree black belt in American Kenpo.
So what was it about American Kenpo? What drew you to it? Compared to the traditional Taekwondo you were training in at the other school, what was it that kind of made you want to jump ship?
It was the kind of like phone booth fighting. I love the self-defense techniques that you see in Kenpo and the perpetual motion that Kenpo brings to the forefront. Where the linear strike ends, a circular strike begins, and you have the universal pattern that all Kenpo practitioners are aware of. It was that in close and just changing from weapon to weapon to weapon, and the flow of the techniques that I really, really loved. And maybe it's because, Kenpo, when you're doing the self-defense techniques, looks a whole lot like the quote-unquote ninja movies.
Yep.
Because you're setting everything up. Each shot sets up the next shot, and the next shot, and the next shot. It's kind of like, I think it was Skip Hancock. He's I don't know what his rank is today, but probably around 8th Dan in American Kenpo.
8th or 9th, I believe.
Yeah. He came and did a seminar, and actually Phil Berthoff was affiliated with Kenpo 2000 eventually, and which was Skip Hancock's organization. I don't even know if it's still around or if it's been renamed. I'm sure it's probably been renamed by now. But Skip Hancock made it as though it was playing pool, where you shoot one shot, and you use that shot to set up the next shot, and the next shot, and the next shot. And although I didn't have that understanding at the time, that's what I loved about it. It was just that flow and just that constant motion and that constant movement that really drew me into the Kenpo realm. And that's what I fell in love with and became obsessed with.
So it's kind of funny, you just to back up a little bit, you mentioned going into that leather store and buying, like nunchucks and throwing stars and stuff. Just thinking about that now, because I'm 2 years younger than you, so we grew up around the same time frame. The fact that you could, as a young kid at that age, could go in. We had a local sporting goods store that I do as a 5th grader, went in and bought my first throwing star.
Yeah.
And nowadays you couldn't even get through the front door.
No, it's too funny because I live in Louisville, Texas now, and there's a mall here that we passed by when I was a kid, and we stopped at this mall. I think we went to some field trip to, I don't know, probably Six Flags amusement park or something, and we're coming back, and we stopped at this mall to shop. I bought a ninja sword.
Wow.
On a school trip.
That's awesome.
I come back on the bus, and I'm holding a sword. They're like, what did you buy? I bought a sword. They're like, okay. So
that would be you're walking back.
Yeah, but that's how it was back then. You still had that. They'd sell anything to anybody. They didn't care.
Yeah, I think that sporting goods store, we had ninja stars, they had butterfly knives, they had throwing knives, they had swords. It was like, if I would have had more money, I would have bought everything they sold.
It's so funny, and I could grab it right now. It's sitting here in my studio. I still have a bokin that I bought from Rebirth Leather. We used to use it as the doorstop for our sliding back door back in the day, and it's sitting right over there in the corner. I don't have the square guard because it's a ninja bokin. It's straight. It doesn't have the curve of the traditional katana type bokin, but it's a ninja bokin, so it's painted black. Nice. And it had a 4x4 square guard. Now, like I say, the guard's gone, but I still have the main shaft of the bokin. So
that's awesome. So now the Murakwan Taekwondo. Now, how long did you study there? Did you gain what rank did you get to in Taekwondo?
First degree black belt in Murakwan.
So I
did get ranked. Yeah, I was there for quite some time, and it was, I had a way back then too of, and it actually led to almost the fall of my whole martial arts training. My ego was really, really, really out of whack back then. And I let it get the better of me. I started thinking I was bigger than I was, and badder than I was, and better than I was. And yeah, it was very, very ego driven because, and I'm not making excuses here. It was a horrible way to be. And we'll even get into it more here in a bit, but it was so empowering to go from the fragile little kid up to still pretty fragile, in all honesty. I mean, even when I was competing, I'm 6'3" and I weighed $155. So still pretty skinny.
Yeah.
But for a skinny guy, I was doing all right. And it just kind of got to my head. So of course I destroyed relationships along the way, and I regret the fact that to this day, I still never really reconciled with Mr. West. We did a little bit because, well, there was some family drama too, and I picked the wrong side. So his son ended up coming into the school, and his son, I think, was fourth Dan at the time. And Michael and I were very, very close in age. And so even though I went to Phil's school, I was still training with Michael on the side as well, because Michael was more into the actual fighting styles. Like me. For those that aren't martial artists, you don't really understand the difference between fighting and traditional martial arts. Mm-hmm. There are concepts that we get from TMA that are applied to actual fighting, but these techniques that you're going to be using on, like in kata and in your forms, however you want to call them, aren't necessarily translated directly to kickboxing or various styles of MMA. I know we can get into a massive debate here as to whether or not TMA is applicable in MMA. I mean, we see Stephen Wonderboy Thompson and I can't think of his name, from Brazil. What's his name? Doesn't even matter because I can't think of his name right now. But we've seen TMA transition into MMA and work effectively, and fighting translates pretty well sometimes. But it was two different concepts back then, because this was in the early 90s, and we didn't really have an understanding of MMA at the time, or what transitioned where into real fighting. But his son was really focused on fighting and really fighting, and being young and dumb and the macho guy that I was at the time, I decided that was something that I wanted to pursue as well. So I got away from Mr. West and went with Mr. West Jr., Michael West. And so that caused a rift there because there was some family dynamics there that were in play. So anyways, bottom line, destroyed that relationship and never had the opportunity really to reconcile. Although apologies were made, they were never really acted on. So I do have that regret to this day. But where were we going with that? I don't know. But yes, I did get to black belt level in Murakwan Taekwondo, but kept pursuing Kenpo. Kenpo was my passion.
Okay. So now you had mentioned before you played basketball and stuff. So was the competition part of martial arts just natural, or was that something you weren't sure about at first, or was it something you always wanted to get into, was the competing part?
I just wanted to be able to fight. I wanted to be tough. And I shouldn't admit this, but that's just how it is. Yeah. I wanted to be a tough guy. I wanted to be the guy that everybody went, oh, don't mess with him. I mean, that was my justification for life at the time. I had an abusive childhood, even though I was supposed to be fragile. Dad smacked everybody around, including mom, on the regs. So my thing was, I just wanted to be tough enough that nobody was going to smack me around.
Okay.
And I wanted to be the smacker and not the smacky. So
makes sense.
So, and I'm not saying that that's the proper way to be in any way. I'm not justifying that at all. It was just a confusing time. And that's what led to a lot of the problems that I had, because now I'm suddenly somewhat empowered. And I quit everything. Martial arts was life. That was it. I lived at the gym, and it didn't matter at the time what gym it was, whether it was Mr. West gym or Michael West gym or whether it was Phil Berthoff's gym. It didn't matter. That was it. Training was life. I had a dojo at the house. I was married at the time. I had at least one child at the start, and I had 2 children before that marriage abruptly ended. But the whole time it was just martial arts. Everything was martial arts. I go home, it's martial arts. I go to the gym, it's martial arts. I would just live at the gym. That was it for years and years and years. And it, again, didn't matter which gym it was. And we haven't even gotten to the gym that I eventually called home. So,
so at those first few schools you were at, did you do any teaching while you were there?
I did some teaching, especially at West Academy under Mr. West. Did some of the early, I think I started teaching, I think it was maybe a purple belt, and I started teaching some of the new folks that would come in, and teaching just became part of the regimen, and I taught from then on, regardless of where I was at. I was usually in some sort of instructor / leadership role, not saying I was supposed to be there, but somehow I managed to be there. So yeah, teaching was always part of it.
Okay. And then you said you went to another. Now, was there any more? You said the gym you eventually called home. Was there anything else in between there, or where did you finally end up?
No, I finally ended up with Rick Arnold out of Sherman, Texas. He had the quintessential karate school. And if you wanted to be really cool, but it was a traditional, it was a Taekwondo school. Okay. And it eventually evolved into an American karate school, which it is today. But that was the school. That's where that's almost like Cobra Kai, but good guys. They always had a good reputation, but it was just the school to be at if you wanted to be one of the tough guys. And everybody around town knew that if you were really into karate, you were really good at karate, you trained under Mr. Arnold. And eventually the opportunity presented itself for me to go, because again, we're going back into the fighting aspects of things. That's how I even got into Rick Arnold's school was I thought I wanted to kickbox. And somehow, I don't even know how, I got invited to train with his fight team one night. And this is the fight team at Mr. Arnold's at the time always trained after all the classes were over. So class would end at 9 o'clock and the fight team would start training at 9. And again, somehow I got an invite there. I don't remember exactly how. I probably went in and initiated some conversation with Mr. Arnold, and he invited me in. And it was going pretty good. It was going all right until my buddy, to this day, he's still one of my best friends in the world, Chad Witcher. He wasn't one of my friends at the time, just some guy I knew, but he was a heavyweight. And man, he hit me with a spin kick right behind my ear that sent me into another dimension. And they said I just fell like a tree, and he KO'd me that night. So, and I don't know that it was intentional. I think it was to a degree, because I know eventually I started training with the fight team, and I know we would greenlight guys that come in and think they're tough, and I'm sure I walked in and thought I was tough, and so I'm pretty confident that the light was green for them to go a little bit harder than they probably should have. But yeah, he gave me a reality check, and I realized that although man, I thought I was tough and I thought I was cool, and even at the time I was already breaking concrete and breaking bricks, and so I'm thinking I'm the man. And Chad hit me with a reality check really, really quick. But I went back, and 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 I knew that I wanted to learn how to fight. And that's how it started. I started training at Mr. Arnold's with the fight team, and took plenty of beatings on my way there, but eventually made it to the fight team. And all of my competition, as far as kickboxing goes, fell under Mr. Arnold. And I eventually went 9-0 as a kickboxer under his tutelage. Nice. And yeah, it was great. And then MMA hit the scene. November of '93, I think it was. Mm-hmm. Was the first UFC, and man, that was a life changer there, wasn't it? Yeah. So Sherman, Texas didn't have a lot of BJJ or Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu at the time. So we were buying Gracie in Action and the Gracie Beginner Series. I think it was a 5 VHS series that I invested in. And at the time, there was also a website called submissionfighter.com, which has now evolved into mixedmartialarts.com. But they had what they called the Fighter's Notebook that they had put together. And the owners there had put together, it was 350, 400 pages I've got it digitized now of a manual you could buy. It came in a big 3-ring binder, and it was black and white photos of these two guys going through various mixed martial arts techniques at the time. And most of it was BJJ oriented. There was a little bit of striking, but a lot of it was drills and a lot of it was technique. And we sat there and we just absorbed the fighter's notebook, and we would literally go into one of our backyards. It was some of us from the fight team, and we'd get together either in the afternoons or on the weekends, and we would put down a tarp that we bought from Walmart, make sure there was no rocks underneath it, and we would just go at it. And that was how we started training MMA. We would just literally go at it. Never would do that today.
No.
But
No. Wow.
But it was nuts. It was kind of have you heard of the Dog Brothers?
Yes.
You know, they're Kali and Eskrima Dog Brothers. They do real stick fighting. It was very Dog Brothers-esque in that we would just go at it. We would go at each other, and full backyard MMA type fights. But we were all friends, and it was competitive, but it wasn't, there wasn't any kind of, it wasn't like Kenpo slice type thing. It was just friends training, and we would go real hard and try to see what works and what doesn't work. And things started evolving, and now today, Sherman, Texas, where I'm from, has got, a couple of BJJ schools up there with some really, really good competitors. But we didn't have it at the time, so we just had to piece part it together.
That's kind of funny. You mentioned the Gracie videos. I think my first video to try to learn groundwork was Marco Huas. I had ordered his video series. I remember him from the early UFCs, the King of the Streets from Brazil.
Yes.
I probably still have a few of those VHS on a shelf somewhere.
That's so amazing, because I can still, as I sit here right now, I still remember exactly where I was at UFC 7 when Marco Huas was fighting Paul the Polar Bear Varlins. Yes. And the pay-per-view cut off in the middle of the main event.
Oh, that pissed me off. We were calling the cable company after hours line, just swearing. It was like, it's not our fault. They only paid for this many hours.
Exactly. The 3-hour time limit or 4-hour time limit was up, and it was over. And I was like, no!
I think it was the next afternoon we finally got to see the rest of it. I'm like, that's too long to wait.
Yep.
That's hilarious.
Yeah, I still remember that. But I loved Marco Huas. He was like my favorite fighter. After that fight, he became my number one favorite fighter. And it's funny you mentioned VHS. I have a closet it's basically a linen closet that has VHSs that are stacked double tall and double deep. Nice. I had all of the UFCs up through, man, I got up into the mid 100s.
Oh, wow.
when I was still recording all of the UFCs, but I had IFC, and then I had what was the one in Brazil that was Marco Huas would fight down there. I can't remember. Sergio Batelli, I think, was the promoter.
Yeah, I know what you're talking about.
There was some IVC or something like that. But anyways, it was Valley Tudo. That's what it was.
Yes,
it was Valley Tudo. And so I had those on VHS, everything. I mean, I had everything you can possibly imagine as far as a VHS collection. Hundreds of VHSs that were fights. I mean, I was obsessed with traditional martial arts. Mm-hmm. But when UFC hit, it just escalated. And along with the escalation of my obsession, the escalation of the ego came back as well.
Yeah.
And so, I mean, the ego is the story in all of this. It was always my downfall. And I wish I could do things differently back then. But, eventually my ego got too big, even for America's Best. When you're the fragile kid and now suddenly you're going, 4-0, 5-0, 6-0, you think you're on top of the world and you think you're just crushing everybody. And I didn't handle it well.
Okay.
And eventually was removed from the school.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Mr. Arnold called me one day and he goes, "Hey, been doing some thinking, and you're going to go ahead and need to leave your key behind the mat, under the mat at the back door." And he goes, "You can either leave it for me or you can meet me at 4 and I'll take it from you."
Wow.
And I went, "It'll be under the mat." So, because, no matter how big my head was, I always knew that he was always just amazing. He's still amazing to this day.
Yeah.
But thankfully, in that regard, he and I, after several years of me doing some soul searching and realizing that I was not the best person in the world, actually one of the worst people or worst types of people in the world, and changing that, we were able to reconcile. And now I've done some work for him. I've called some of his fights. I've announced some of his tournaments, and we have a good relationship again. So I'm pretty excited about that.
Very cool. That's good. So did you ever actually step into the cage and do MMA fighting?
I did. Didn't have quite the success that I had as a kickboxer.
Okay.
Ground game was lacking a bit. I went 2-3 as a MMA or submission guy. Yeah, it just my ground game. I mean, I was choked out every time. Okay. It was either I got guillotined and triangle choked twice. So always got choked. That big old long skinny neck of mine was always easy to find.
So was that amateur or pro?
That was amateur, and I did one pro.
Okay.
But I remember my first fight was against a guy from the school with Guy Mesger and Trey Telligman.
Oh, yeah.
He was from the Lions Den. And at the time, do you remember Pancration, the organization back then? Well, I knew Guy Mesger, King of Pancrase, knew Guy Mesger had fought in the UFC, and I knew he was based in Dallas, but I'd never had the opportunity to train with him before this. And I show up, and there's my guy, and there are two of my idols, Guy Mesger and Trey Telligman. And they're at the weigh-ins with their guy, who is the guy that I'm fighting. So I instantly panic. I'm like, oh my God, I'm going up against this guy. There's no way I can, this is real. And so I managed to make it through the weigh-ins the day before, and we get back the next day, and here he is. He's standing across the ring from me, Guy on one side, Trey on the other, and they're standing on the ring apron. And he's wearing real Pancration shin guards and foot guards, right? And I'm like, I looked at my coach, Eric Lovelace, who he was involved with Rick Arnold's school as well, but he was more of the MMA kind of guy. He was more of the MMA coach than Rick really was. So Eric was there cornering me, and I look over and I go, man, he's got like on real gear and everything, and I'm sitting here in Nike shorts, and no, I'm not even geared for this. So anyways, bottom line was I lost that fight before it even started. The bell rings, and we have a nice exchange on the feet, which on the feet, I'm fine. I'm good to go there. But then it got on the ground, and I'm completely lost. I had no idea. And I can remember being in his guard, and I hear Guy talk about pass his arm. And then he goes, all right, put the leg over. All right, triangle. He goes, pull his head down. He's talking about pulling my head down. And I'm like, why is he pulling my and I'm oh, that's why he pulled my head down. I got you. Okay, cool. But yeah, I still remember Guy Mesger coaching him every step of the way, every move. And, Eric's over there like, hey, kick his ass, Larry. Can I get something a little bit deeper than kick his ass? Can I get a real technique, maybe something that I should do? So,
See, I'm trying to remember. I want to say Guy Metzger was involved in that, maybe as a coach on that Chuck Norris World Combat League. Do you remember that one?
He was. Yeah.
Okay. That's one. That was a great idea, and I wish it would have stuck because I thought it was really cool to watch.
I came real close to fighting in that organization.
Really?
It just did not come to fruition. My friend Pete Spratt, Pete actually fought in the World Combat League or the World Combat Championships. Is that what it was?
Yeah, it was WCL, World Combat League.
World Combat League, yeah. Yep. So he fought in that organization, and then, of course, he actually made it to the UFC as well. Pete and I, we came up through the ranks together. We started training karate essentially together. We don't even remember when we don't know each other. But Pete's a real athlete, and I was just a real egomaniac. And he managed to leverage his athleticism and made it to the big show. Matter of fact, just last week, he signed his first student to the UFC. Oh, so nice. He's still training, yeah. Very cool. They fought on ESPN Plus, and Dana White's looking for a fight. And if he won the fight, he made it. He got his contract, and sure enough, he got his contract. So I was really, really, really happy for Pete there.
Nice. So I'm kind of curious, thinking back to that first school when you started teaching, I think you said as a purple belt or whatever.
Yeah.
And then of course now in your career, you teach, you coach people. What do you think's changed about your teaching style over the years, and how do you think your martial arts training influenced what you do now?
My martial arts training influenced everything, in that regardless of where I am in my life or what stage of life I was in after the fact, especially after getting kicked out of America's Best, because that was devastating to me. And I deserved every bit of it. There's no denying that. But it also sent me on a path of reconciling my ability to deal with what could be considered positions of authority or even positions of experience, and translating that into actual teaching. When I taught back then, when I was a purple belt teaching, I wasn't teaching to teach. I wasn't teaching to share. I was teaching to boost my ego. I was teaching because it made me feel better. Okay. It made me feel big. I'm the teacher. So it put me in a position of authority, and I relished that. I thought, this is the greatest. I am the best. It was all me. It's everything I did wasn't for the benefit of anybody that I was doing it for. It was for the benefit of me. And now today, at 49 years old, with a ton of life lessons between now and then, it's the direct opposite. So now I want others to know what I've gone through. I want others to know what I've experienced, regardless of what what I'm facilitating, whether I'm talking about podcasting or whether I'm talking about martial arts or whether I'm teaching you how to I don't know, draw. It doesn't matter. Now I do it from a place of humility and providing value to that person that I'm training in whatever it may be. So the philosophies are night and day. They're completely yin and yang, if you want to keep with the theme there. It's just totally opposite. So martial arts gave me confidence.
Okay.
And it also gave me arrogance that in the end gave me humility. It's an interesting journey, but it took every bit of it to put me where I'm at today.
So when did your writing start? I know you've written a lot of articles and stuff and been published numerous times. Kind of when did that start for you? Was that something you had ever done before?
I had never really done it before. Everything that I've written is podcast or branding related.
Okay.
Everything that I've published, my book is on podcasting. Articles that I've written are all about podcasting. And maybe not podcasting specific, but they're in podcasting periodicals.
Right.
And it's more of, I use some of the lessons that I learned from martial arts in presenting my podcasting, the confidence that I have on the mic, the confidence that I have on camera. All of that stems from the lessons that I learned back then. But I didn't start writing until a few years ago. The story gets even darker after I got kicked out of the karate school. I continued fighting and training at gyms per se, but I didn't necessarily have any direction. And I eventually signed on to do a fight for what was the name of the promotion? Man, I'm drawing blanks this morning. I need caffeine. But I signed on to, I think it was no, it wasn't Ring of Fire. I can't remember. But anyhow, I signed on for a promotion. And I was training at the time with Pete Spratt and some others. And we went down to Houston to train with Saul Solis, who recently passed away from COVID. Saul Solis at the time trained the likes of Tito Ortiz and Rico Rodriguez and Eve Edwards and all of the names and champions from the earlier years of the UFC. Saul had some aspect of their career. And I'm down there one day and I'm rolling with Eve Edwards, and rolling, for those uninitiated, just doing jiu-jitsu or wrestling per se. And I'm rolling with Eve's, and Saul walks by and he goes, "Hey, bro, your cardio's a little suspect." And that just destroyed me.
Oh, wow.
You go, what? How does just that sentence go, your cardio's a little suspect, destroy you? Well, I knew that my cardio was suspect. My cardio, even after my surgery, my cardio was always suspect. It was always my failing. Even though I went 9-0 as a kickboxer, had those fights gone, some of them especially, gone one more round, I probably would have gotten knocked out. I've only got 60% lung capacity of the normal individual because my lungs were deformed. I have my lungs that go up above my clavicle. It's freaking crazy when you see the x-ray, and they're real narrow and tubular, and they go down almost into my hips. And that's because they developed so awkwardly in those early developmental stages that they were deformed the whole time, and it left me with lung capacity issues. So Saul walking by, and I was really stepping up. I was stepping my game up, way up in competition. And it was a pro fight, and it was an organization out of Louisiana. Matter of fact, it was supposed to be the card that Pete Spratt fought Rich Clemente on, and Pete won his first world title by beating Rich Clemente at that event. And I was supposed to be on that card, but what ended up happening when Saul walked by and said that was I emotionally and mentally collapsed, and I pulled out of the fight. I got quote-unquote sick. So here's the tough guy. Here's the egomaniac. Here's the guy that's on top of the world, has a coach that he respects beyond respect. Just really, I mean, I held him in such a super, super high regard. And then he says something like that, and I knew in my heart of hearts that I'm chasing a pipe dream here. This is never going to work. I'm never going to make it to the UFC. I'm never going to be a real professional fighter. It's just not going to happen. No matter how hard I train, no matter what I do, no matter what I eat, no matter what I take. Because there might have been some time in there where I might have been taking a little extra, some supplements, quote unquote, to try to extend my athleticism. And it just didn't matter at the time. And again, I pulled out, I got quote unquote sick, and I didn't fight the next night. but you'll still see me cage side coaching Pete. So I was too sick to fight, but I was right on there. I'm right there cage side working his corner. So I wasn't that sick. But I was sick because I was crushed. I knew emotionally, and I broke. And to this day, I regret not fighting. Even though I probably would have got my ass kicked, it would have been the first time I got my backside smacked around. Mm-hmm. It was the reality check that one sentence set in. And again, I just broke completely emotionally and mentally. And from that point on, I really quit training because it seemed like everything I was doing was for naught. And I started partying, and I started just hanging out at the club and doing all kinds of things that I didn't do in my early 20s. This is my late 20s now. And it eventually led to a point where I became an alcoholic, and it really, really took over and destroyed my life. Ended up in rehab. It's been 7 years now since I've been out of rehab, but that 10, 12-year progression there, maybe it was longer, 10 to 12 to 15 years progression there of alcoholism and partying and not doing anything worth a crap really with my life. Granted, I had a great career going. Even through rehab, I had a career going. They supported me through all that, so that was great. I know I'm all over the place here, but I'm trying to piece it all together. But I quit training martial arts, became an alcoholic. Once I got out of rehab, I knew I needed something in my life, and podcasting was there. And that's how I got into podcasting. And podcasting gave me that creative direction. It gave me that ability to communicate, and my outlook was completely different on all aspects of life. And so I started writing, I started creating content, and it's evolved to where it's at today.
Wow. So you mentioned it, so let's give a little plug. Just talk about your podcast a little bit.
Yeah, my podcast is called Readily Random, and it started off, it's evolved as well. It's kind of interesting because all journeys start with one thing in mind, and who knows where it's going to take us and how it's going to evolve along the way. But when I started Readily Random, it was initially to be a celebration or a story of those that had gone through maybe something similar to rehab. Maybe they had their own addictions that they've overcome. Maybe they've had lifestyle choices that they regret, maybe whatever, but they found themselves on the other side, and they're wanting to share these stories to help other people along their paths as well. But it actually ended up being a little bit too raw, a little bit too much for me. Okay. And so it ended up evolving into an entrepreneurial podcast. And it's been an entrepreneurial podcast now for probably 2 years. And that's what we do today. I have entrepreneurs that come on and tell their stories, how they got started, how they found success doing what they're doing, and what are some of the tips and techniques that they can share with the audience that they can apply to their own businesses and continue moving forward in their entrepreneurial journees as well.
So I will definitely put links for your podcast and your website and everything in the show notes to send people that way. I know I've listened to a few episodes, and I am a subscriber. So
yay!
Yeah, that's pretty much. I as my last guest, I was just talking to before you. We're both former radio guys, and I was saying I don't listen to radio anymore. I used to love local radio, and local radio has gone downhill. Pretty much all I listen to is podcasts when I'm driving in my car. So. It's like,
podcasts are where it's at. I
subscribe to like 100 of them. I don't listen to every episode of everyone I've subscribed to, but
sure.
I listen to a buttload of podcasts now.
Yeah, I've only got a handful that I listen to regularly.
Yep.
But I don't miss those that I do listen to regularly, and I listen to others as well. It varies. I'm one of those guys that I really don't even listen. I listen to my car occasionally, but I generally listen to podcasts on YouTube.
Oh, okay.
And or now that Joe Rogan moved over to Spotify, I occasionally watch Joe Rogan over there. I haven't been a big follower since he moved to Spotify, but occasionally I'll check him out. But I primarily like to, quote unquote, watch my podcasts. And if I'm working or something, I'll have a window pulled up, and I'll have a podcast playing in the background, depending on what I'm doing. And then if the conversation gets, heated, or whether if there's something there where I go, oh man, I probably need to check this out, I'll tab over and I'll watch the conversation take place.
Okay.
And I'm a different kind of consumer for podcasts, which is kind of interesting, But yeah, that's my favorite way to do it.
Yeah, I'm almost strictly audio. I very rarely will watch a podcast. It's almost always audio. So do it at the gym when I'm working out. Do it when at work, my full-time job and whatever.
Yeah,
it's usually got a headphone on, at least in one of my ears, and listening to a podcast. So
it's funny because I still get in trouble because I call video podcasts. I call them podcasts, and some of the old school podcast gods, they frown upon that. That is not a podcast. It doesn't have an RSS feed. It's not a podcast.
Nice. Nice.
But I've planted my flag, and I say it is a podcast.
Well, there you go. So let's say someone approaches you, and they're I'm thinking of getting involved in martial arts. What are some tips you give them? What to look for in a school? What to look for in an instructor? And maybe some things to avoid.
Man, that's a tough one. Some of the things, because again, my perception has changed so much these days as to what I would look for in a school. I don't know that I personally could go back to a TMA school. I don't know that I could personally go back to a Kenpo school even though I love Kenpo karate. And in my studio, you can kind of see it behind me right there at my thumb tip is my black belt. It's blurry because my camera's got that bokeh background on it, but I still have my background, my black belt in the background of my podcast studio. So I love it, but I don't know that I would recommend anyone go to it. So I would recommend finding some place that teaches a mix, that teaches, I'd send them to an MMA gym. I would all day. There are some MMA gyms here in the Dallas-Fort Worth Metroplex that I highly respect, that are open, that are more so open to public than professional fighters. And I'd probably send them someplace like that, someplace where they could establish a relationship with the instructor and get something a little more personal out of it. I think that if I had not had the personal relationships, even though I did everything I could to destroy them with my instructors, I wouldn't have found the success that I did find in martial arts. It wouldn't have had the impact on me that it did have on me overall. And I know I wouldn't have learned the lessons that I carry with me to this day had I not had those personal relationships with my instructors. So that would be one of the things that I would really infer that they look for. Look for a school where you feel comfortable. Look for a gym that's personable. Look for some place where you're not just another gi on the mat and running up their counts for the month. I mean, that would be the biggest thing. Just you want some place that feels like home. You want to walk into the place and everybody greets you accordingly. You want to walk into the place and feel comfortable. You want to, when you're on the mat, regardless of what you're training, whether it's kickboxing or whether it's taekwondo or whatever it may be, you want to feel comfortable in the fact that you can go in there and you can be you. You can release your uniqueness and be who you really are while you're training. And if you find that comfort level, if you find that level of reception and you find a place that you can call home, then that's where you want to be.
Nice. So now, usually at this point in the podcast is where I ask my guests, because a lot of my guests are traditional backgrounds. I usually ask them their thoughts on MMA. You obviously are an MMA fan. You've fought MMA. So the question I want to ask you is, what are your thoughts as someone who's been around the MMA world for a long time? What are your thoughts on weight cutting in MMA and the kind of the controversy about that?
Oh, I hate it. I hate weight cutting. I hated it back in the day because, it wasn't as prevalent as it is now when I was competing, but it was still around. And fighters were still doing it, but I understand it to a certain degree, and I think weight cutting should be permitted within a certain limit. I don't know what that limit should be, but when you've got people that are walking around at 240 and they're cutting down to 185 to compete, that's just nonsense to me. And even back in the day, Eve Edwards used to cut about 18 to 22 pounds per fight. And I'm like, man, how do you do that for starters? And how is that legal? So even back in the day when it was important to me, I still never really bought into it. I never really liked the concept of cutting massive amounts of weight. 10, 12 pounds, yeah, sure, drop down a weight class and then put it back on. But again, 30, 40 pounds like some of these fighters are doing that are just dehydrating themselves. And people are dying from it. There are literally fighters dying from doing it. That's a level of ridiculousness that should be regulated to some degree.
See, the worst part for me is the fact that, let's say you're going to fight at 185, you walk around at 205, you cut to 185, and then over the next 24 hours, you put that weight back on, so you're actually fighting at 205. So why not just fight at 205? That's the parts that never made sense to me. Just have them fight at their walk-around weight. It makes perfect sense.
I would totally support same-day weigh-ins. I'd be all over it. If they were taking votes, I would vote for same-day weigh-ins and take it from that perspective. I think that 24 hours that they have to rehydrate using IVs and going to the hospital and doing vitamin drips and doing everything they can to get back in tip-top shape so that they can fight the next day, I think it's ridiculous. I think it's extremely dangerous from a variety of perspectives, not just from the cutting the weight perspective, but now you have fighters in there, and we see it from time to time. We see fighters that are competing in the same quote-unquote weight class. One's obviously much, much larger than the other.
Yeah.
And that's dangerous, folks. We're dealing with people that lives are literally on the line. People have died in MMA fights, never died in the UFC.
Right.
The UFC does not have any deaths on the record, but there are some other promotions, especially there's a Russian promotion that I'm thinking of specifically that has had fighters die in the cage. And that's not something that we want to experience.
No.
You know, that's not something that you ever want to happen in any sport. Granted, some of the guys that are proponents of weight cutting go, oh, people, you've had deaths in the NFL, you've had deaths here. Okay, but that doesn't make it right.
Exactly.
You know, we don't want to put ourselves in a position to where we justify death.
Yeah.
We want to make it as safe as possible for the fighters. You know, it leads me down to thinking of the coaches and the managers of these fighters. You know, who are they putting them up against? And do they really care about their fighters? Or do they just really care about those paychecks that they're getting from the fighters? I think a lot of it leans more towards option B there. Mm-hmm. But I think it's something that definitely needs to be done. It's legalized cheating, in my opinion.
I agree with you 100%. So thinking back of all your years in martial arts, if you had to pick one martial artist to put at the top of your list for someone you truly admire, whether it's someone you've actually met and trained with, or just a lot of people pick like a movie person that got them interested, just if you had to put one at the top of your list for someone you truly admire, who would it be?
Still to this day, and I'm lucky enough to be friends with him on Facebook, had a massive influence on me as a child, is Stephen K. Hayes.
Nice.
Stephen K. Hayes is, he's a ninjutsu practitioner. Mm-hmm. And to this day, he actually just retired. He turned his dojo over to his top student, and he just made that transition, I want to say a month or so ago.
Oh, wow.
But he's still involved to a certain degree, and they're having their big yearly event right now. But Stephen K. Hayes, I mean, I can remember listening to his audiobooks back in the day, and I had him on cassette. And he just influenced so much with me getting started. And if it wasn't for him and the books that he wrote and the contributions that he made and his training in Japan and bringing Tagakuru Ninjutsu over to the States and everything that he did there, man, I don't know that it would have been the same. So Stephen K. Hayes, even though I've never had the opportunity to meet him or talk to him, he would definitely be my number one biggest influence ever.
That's awesome. I actually do have a request in to get him on my show, so fingers crossed.
I will definitely be listening.
Very cool. So then, in all your years of martial arts, is there one philosophy that stands out for you that you've learned?
I think the number one is humility. It's balancing that power. You know, this sounds so cheesy, but it's so true, man. You know, you think back to Spider-Man, with great power comes great responsibility.
Yep.
And that responsibility in martial arts covers so much. It's not just if you're fighting someone and you have the ability to do something, you don't do it necessarily. Sure, that's an aspect of it, but the responsibility is carrying that weight with you in a way that provides value to those around you, that provides support to those around you, that helps those around you. That power isn't there to help you beat everybody up or go to the club with your little chest puffed out, hoping somebody starts something. That's not what that power is all about. It's completely opposite of that. And granted, it took a long time for me to learn that, but that is the biggest takeaway, that it's everything in my life now. It's how I function every day. And it all comes from going through all those experiences, making all those mistakes, taking all those whoopings coming up through the ranks, and getting those reality checks by the instructors at the time. I know I was difficult. I know I was always difficult. I was a difficult child, but yeah, that's it, man. Just that humility and understanding that the direction that it can take you, and it's your responsibility to make sure that you take it in a direction that helps others. That's it, man.
That's a great answer. So, favorite martial arts book?
Ooh, favorite martial arts book. The Tale of Jeet Kune Do was always huge, of course. That was a massive one. But for some reason, Ninja 4 by Stephen K. Hayes, that one for some reason is popping out to me. I don't know if I, for some reason, worshipped that one more than the others. But that entire series was so big for me. And I can still remember reading through his Ninja series and then, running out and ninjing it up, throwing my grappling hook up in the tree and trying to scale the trees and just doing all kinds of crazy stuff. But it's still, that was the foundation for everything, man, was Stephen Hayes and his books. That was what just kept me just right there, just salivating over martial arts. And though that series, along with the Tale of Jeet Kune Do, are probably my biggest.
Wonderful. So now you grew up in the 80s like me, so I'm looking forward to your answer for this one. Hopefully you'll have a good one. Favorite martial arts video game?
Oh, Karate Champ.
Oh, nice.
Yeah, Karate Champ. That would definitely be it, with the 2 joysticks and the various joysticks directions designated which techniques you're doing. So Karate Champ would be it, man.
Very cool. All right. Favorite martial arts TV show?
Oh, man, martial arts TV show. The Master's way up there, up there.
Yep.
And I think just because we said the Master earlier, that's really all that's coming to mind right now. I'm trying to think, man. Walker Texas Ranger was huge too. Yep. Can we call that a martial arts show?
It's got Chuck Norris. Of course, it's a martial arts show.
Yeah. So I was lucky enough to be in an episode of Walker Texas Ranger as an extra. So
really,
it was fun. Cool. It was the Sons of Thunder when that whole thing was going down.
I was excited for that spinoff, and I'm sad it never happened. I loved those characters that they were going to spin off a whole series on that. Jamie Wilczek, I believe, was one of the guys that played one of those guys. Yeah,
okay,
such a good show. I missed that.
Yeah. They were filming here in Dallas, which they did a lot.
Yeah.
And at the time I was fight training. I think I was still at Mr. Arnold's school full time, but we would train at a gym called Trainers Elite down here in Dallas with Ron Van Browning. And that's where you would run into guys like Guy Mesger on the mat, and Trey Tilligman, and Alex Andrade, and Oleg Tokhtarov was there from time to time as well. Nice. And they filmed at Ron's school, so we got the invite to come down and be extras. And you can see me in a dirty black gi standing on the edge of the ring, cheering on the bad guy as he tries to whoop. I can't remember the Sons of Thunder main guy, whatever his name was, that kid. But they were fighting there in the school, and we were cheering against him. So
that's awesome. I'll have to go back and watch that episode now. You got my interest peaked.
You can catch me just a very little snippet for about maybe a second or two at the edge of the ring there. I'm on the back wall cheering along and banging on the mat. So
that's cool. Awesome. All right. Final question. Favorite martial arts movie?
Oh man. Gosh, that is such a tough one, but I'll go Pray for Death. I'll go Pray for Death with Sho Kosugi. Nice. It's a ninja movie, of course, and it starts off with a traditional Japanese ninja scene where there's ninjas coming out of the woods everywhere, and the main ninjas, whooping everybody up, and it's awesome. But he then moves to the States and opens up a Japanese museum of sorts, like a doll museum of some sort. And some drug smugglers end up using some of those dolls to smuggle cocaine, and they whack his family. And he gets beat up, but he goes, "Before this is over, you will pray for death." And he tells that to the bad guy. And then he has this really cool ninja helmet that's really kind of out there. It's a steel helmet that's got this steel face guard. And of course, by the end, he whoops everybody, and the guy's on his way to being destroyed. And he goes and he's praying for death. Kill me, kill me, kill me. So yeah, he prays for death. So Pray for Death was my favorite one.
That's awesome. Cool. Well, Larry, I just want to thank you, man. This has been I learned a lot about you I didn't know, and reinforced some more stuff I did know. It's such a fun time chatting with you today. Any last minute stuff you want to leave us with? And like I said, I will put links for all your stuff in the show notes to make sure everyone can check out what you're doing.
No, I appreciate it, man. This has been great. And I apologize. I know I was all over the place trying to piece everything together, but I'm a little scattered this morning. I'm normally more on point, so I apologize for that. But hey, I tell you what, if you want to start a podcast, if you would, head over to podcastboost.com, where I help you launch your podcast with a purpose. We'll sit down, we'll figure out exactly who your audience is and what your brand is, and then we will set out a list of goals for your podcast, and together we will launch your podcast and help you reach your audience. So that's what we do there. Other than that, yeah, Readily Random, please visit readilyrandom.com, listen to the podcast, subscribe, rate, review, all that fun stuff. And again, Brian, thank you so much.
Perfect, man. Great way to end it.
Thanks for listening to Everyday Martial Artist. We hope you will join us every week for a brand new episode with a different martial artist telling their story. If you enjoy the show, be sure to leave us a review. Also, be sure to check out our website at everydaymartialartist.com. There you can find all of our episodes and contact us to suggest guests and ask questions. Again, thanks for listening to Everyday Martial Artist, and we'll see you next week.